The small town of Meadowbrook was the kind of place where nothing ever happened. Nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, it had a charm that came from its simplicity. Life here moved at a slow pace, dictated by the rhythm of nature rather than the chaos of modern cities. For Ethan Carter, a 26-year-old mechanic with grease-streaked hands and an insatiable curiosity for anything mechanical, this quiet existence suited him just fine. Ethan spent most of his days in his garage-turned-workshop, tinkering with old cars and broken-down appliances people brought to him. His reputation as the go-to fixer in town had earned him steady work, but it also left little room for excitement outside of turning wrenches and replacing parts. That all changed on a crisp autumn night when something extraordinary interrupted the stillness of Meadowbrook. It started with a streak of light cutting through the sky, a fiery trail brighter than any shooting star Ethan had ever seen. At first, he thought it might be a meteor, but the sound that followed was unlike anything natural. It wasn't the dull thud of impact. Instead, it was a deep, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. The noise startled him so much that he dropped the wrench he'd been holding, sending it clattering across the concrete floor of his workshop. "What in the world?" Ethan muttered under his breath, stepping outside to get a better look. The hum grew louder, accompanied by flashes of light emanating from the nearby forest. Whatever it was, it hadn't landed far away. Grabbing a flashlight and slipping on his boots, Ethan decided to investigate. He told himself it was probably just some fallen satellite or debris, not alien spacecraft, despite what the movies might suggest. Still, the thought lingered in the back of his mind like a flickering candle flame. The forest was eerily quiet as Ethan made his way toward the source of the disturbance. Normally teeming with nocturnal creatures, tonight there wasn't even the chirp of crickets. The air felt heavy, almost electric, making the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. When he finally reached the clearing, he froze, his flashlight beam catching sight of something that defied explanation. There, nestled among the trees, was an object unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. It was sleek and metallic, its surface shimmering faintly as though alive. Strange symbols glowed softly along its edges, pulsating in rhythmic patterns that seemed almost hypnotic. But it wasn't the pot itself that took Ethan's breath away. It was what lay inside. A figure reclined within the vessel, frail and motionless. At first glance, Ethan thought it was human, but closer inspection revealed otherwise. Her skin glowed faintly, casting an ethereal light over her delicate features. Long silvery hair cascaded around her shoulders, and her ears tapered into elegant points. She wore a tattered garment that shimmered like liquid metal, clinging to her slender frame. Most striking of all were her eyes, wide and luminous, filled with both fear and desperation. "Hello," Ethan called out cautiously, his voice trembling slightly. "Are you okay?" The figure stirred weakly, her lips parting as if trying to speak. After a moment, she managed a soft, melodic sound that didn't quite form words. Slowly, she raised one hand toward him, palm open in a gesture that seemed pleading rather than threatening. Ethan hesitated, unsure whether to approach or run. Logic warred with instinct. This could be dangerous, yet how could he leave someone in need? Taking a step forward, Ethan noticed the faint glow emanating from her fingertips. It pulsed gently, matching the rhythm of the symbols on the pod. As he drew nearer, the woman spoke again, this time in halting, accented English. "Please, help me." Her voice was soft, almost musical, but tinged with exhaustion. Ethan knelt beside her, his heart pounding. "Who are you? What happened?" She closed her eyes briefly, as if gathering strength, then opened them again to meet his gaze. "I am Lyra 7, she said, her words careful and measured. "My ship damaged. I cannot return home." Ethan's mind raced. Alien, ship, home. These weren't concepts he'd ever imagined encountering outside of science fiction novels. Yet here she was, undeniable proof that humanity wasn't alone in the universe. Despite his shock, he couldn't ignore the vulnerability in her expression. She looked utterly lost, like someone cast adrift in an unfamiliar sea. "You're hurt," Ethan observed, noticing the faint bruises marring her glowing skin. "Can you move? Do you need medical attention?" Lyra shook her head weakly. "No hospitals. They will ask questions. Questions I cannot answer." Her voice grew softer, almost pleading. "You must help me. Hide me. Protect me." Ethan frowned, torn between disbelief and compassion. Sheltering an alien was absurd, illegal even, but abandoning her felt equally wrong. There was something about her demeanor, a mixture of pride and despair, that struck a chord deep within him. Against his better judgment, he nodded. "All right," he said finally. "I'll take you to my place. But we need to be careful. If anyone finds out—" "They will not," Lyra interrupted, her tone firm despite her weakened state. "I will do whatever it takes to repay you. Anything." Her determination surprised him. For someone who appeared so fragile, she carried an unshakable resolve. Ethan helped her to her feet, supporting her weight as they made their way back to his workshop. Along the way, she explained fragments of her story, that she hailed from a distant planet ravaged by its own hubris, that her people had scattered across the stars in search of refuge. Each word painted a picture of a civilization brought low by greed and arrogance, leaving survivors like her to fend for themselves. By the time they reached the safety of his workshop, Ethan's head swirled with questions. Why had she come to Earth? What did she want from him? And more importantly, what consequences would follow from bringing her into his life? But as he settled her onto a makeshift cot and wrapped a blanket around her shivering form, one thing became clear. His quiet, predictable world had been forever altered. The morning sun filtered through the cracks in Ethan's workshop, casting golden beams across the cluttered space. For the first time in years, Ethan woke up feeling unsure of what the day would bring. His unexpected guest, Lyra 7, was still asleep on the makeshift cot he prepared for her. Her faint glow had dimmed during the night, making her appear almost human, except for the occasional flicker of light beneath her skin that betrayed her otherworldly nature. Ethan moved quietly around the workshop, trying not to disturb her. He brewed a pot of coffee and sat at his workbench, staring into the steam rising from his mug as his mind raced. What exactly had he gotten himself into? Sheltering an alien wasn't just risky, it was insane. And yet, every time he thought about turning her away, guilt gnawed at him. She hadn't asked for help out of malice. She was desperate, alone, and clearly running from something far bigger than either of them could comprehend. Lyra stirred awake after a while, her luminous eyes fluttering open. She sat up slowly, wincing slightly as if her body still ached. When she noticed Ethan watching her, she offered a small, grateful smile. "Thank you," she said softly, "for helping me." Ethan shrugged, attempting to play it cool despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. "Don't mention it. But we need to figure out what happens next. You can't stay here forever." "I understand," Lyra replied, her tone firm, but tinged with sadness. "I do not wish to burden you. I only ask for temporary refuge until I regain my strength. After that," she hesitated, looking down at her hands, "I will leave, or find a way to repay you." Ethan frowned. "Repay me? How?" Lyra met his gaze, her expression unwavering. "I will serve you, in any capacity you require. Cleaning, cooking, assisting with your work. I am capable of many things. My people may have fallen, but I still possess knowledge and skills that could be of use." Her words caught Ethan off guard. Serve him. The idea felt strange, almost wrong. He wasn't the kind of person who expected others to bow to him or cater to his needs. Still, he couldn't deny that having someone with advanced knowledge might come in handy. Maybe she could even teach him a thing or two about technology, something that could elevate his modest repair business to new heights. "All right," Ethan said finally, scratching the back of his neck. "But let's get one thing straight. You're not my servant. We'll call it a partnership. You help me, I help you. Deal? Lyra tilted her head, considering his offer. Then, with a slow nod, she agreed. A partnership. Very well. Over the next few days, Ethan began to see just how valuable Lyra's presence could be. Despite her weakened state, she quickly proved herself to be incredibly resourceful. Using scraps and spare parts lying around the workshop, she demonstrated how to build simple yet astonishing devices. One afternoon, she showed Ethan how to modify an old radio transmitter, enhancing its range exponentially. Another time, she helped him upgrade a broken-down tractor engine using techniques that seemed impossibly efficient. Word spread fast among the townsfolk when Ethan started returning repaired items faster than usual, and with improvements no one had ever seen before. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman who ran the local bakery, marveled at how her ancient oven now heated evenly without fail. Jake Miller, the farmer whose tractor had been on its last legs, couldn't stop talking about how smoothly it ran after Ethan's miracle fix. Even the skeptics in town were impressed, though some whispered behind closed doors about where Ethan had suddenly acquired such expertise. Of course, Ethan didn't reveal the truth. Instead, he credited his newfound success to late-night research and experimentation. Lyra stayed hidden during these transactions, observing silently from the shadows of the workshop. She insisted on remaining unseen, fearing that exposure would put both of them in danger. Ethan respected her wishes, but he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that keeping her existence a secret wouldn't be sustainable in the long run. Despite their growing camaraderie, there were moments when tension simmered beneath the surface. Lyra rarely spoke of her past beyond vague references to her planet's downfall. Whenever Ethan pressed her for details, she grew quiet, her glowing eyes clouding with sorrow. It was clear that whatever had happened to her people weighed heavily on her heart. One evening, as they worked together to assemble a prototype energy converter based on Lyra's designs, Ethan decided to broach the subject again. "You don't have to tell me everything," he said gently, tightening a bolt with his wrench. "But if we're going to make this work, I need to understand why you're here. Why Earth? Why now?" Lyra paused, her delicate fingers hovering over the device. For a moment, she said nothing, her gaze fixed on the half-finished contraption. Then, with a deep sigh, she began to speak. "My world was once prosperous, a shining beacon of progress and innovation," she explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "We harnessed the power of stars, manipulated matter itself, and built cities that floated among the clouds. But our ambition blinded us. We consumed our resources recklessly, believing we were invincible. When the land became barren and the skies turned toxic, it was too late to undo the damage." She paused, her hands trembling slightly. "Our leaders fought amongst themselves, blaming each other for the collapse. Chaos ensued. Many perished, while others fled aboard ships like mine, seeking sanctuary elsewhere. Those who remained, they turned to enslavement, forcing survivors to labor under cruel conditions in hopes of rebuilding what we had lost." Ethan listened intently, his chest tightening with each word. "And you escaped?" Lyra nodded. "Barely. My family. They did not survive. I managed to steal a pod and flee, but I know they will come for me. They always do." Her confession left Ethan reeling. He hadn't realized the depth of her suffering, or the danger she carried with her. "If they find you here," he began, trailing off. "They will destroy everything," Lyra finished grimly. "Which is why I must remain hidden. For your sake as much as mine." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. Ethan wanted to reassure her, to promise that he'd protect her no matter what. But he knew better. Protecting her meant risking everything, including his own life. Still, as he watched her return to tinkering with the energy converter, her movements precise and determined, he couldn't help but admire her resilience. Whatever fears she harbored, she refused to let them break her. And perhaps in some small way, she reminded him of himself, a survivor doing whatever it took to keep moving forward. By the end of the week, their partnership had transformed the workshop into a hub of innovation. Devices once considered obsolete now hummed with renewed purpose thanks to Lyra's guidance. Yet, as Ethan stood beside her, marveling at their handiwork, he couldn't ignore the looming question. How long could they keep this fragile piece intact? For now, though, they had each other, and that was enough. As weeks passed, Ethan and Lyra settled into a rhythm that blurred the line between necessity and companionship. The workshop became their shared sanctuary, a place where gears turned alongside whispered conversations, and where ordinary tools were transformed into extraordinary inventions under Lyra's guidance. Yet beneath the surface of this newfound harmony, cracks began to form. Meadowbrook, once a sleepy town untouched by anything out of the ordinary, started showing signs of change, subtle at first, but impossible to ignore. Crops in nearby fields grew unnaturally fast, their stalks reaching heights never seen before. Electronics in homes and businesses malfunctioned sporadically, flickering on and off or emitting strange static noises. Even the weather seemed erratic, with sudden gusts of wind carrying an electric charge that made people's hair stand on end. At first, no one connected these anomalies to Ethan's workshop, or to the mysterious omen hiding within its walls. But rumors spread quickly in a small town, and soon whispers of strange lights and otherworldly energy reached Ethan's ears. He tried to brush it off as coincidence or exaggeration, but deep down, he knew better. Something about Lyra's presence was affecting the world around them, and not always for the better. One evening, after a long day of tinkering, Ethan confronted her. They sat side by side on overturned crates near the back of the workshop, the faint glow of Lyra's skin illuminating the dim space. "Lyra," he began hesitantly, "I need to ask you something. Have you noticed anything unusual lately? Outside, I mean." Lyra's luminous eyes widened slightly, and she glanced away. For a moment, she said nothing, her fingers tracing patterns on the wooden crate beneath her. Then, with a sigh, she nodded. "Yes, I have felt it too. It is difficult to explain." Ethan leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Try, please. People are starting to talk. If they figure out what's going on." "I know," Lyra interrupted softly, her voice tinged with guilt. "It is my fault. My body emits low levels of energy, residual effects from my people's technology. On my planet, this was normal, even beneficial. Here, however," she trailed off, shaking her head. "Here, it disrupts your environment, causes imbalance." Ethan stared at her, processing her words. "So all those weird things happening, the crops, the electronics, it's because of you." "In part," Lyra admitted, "but also because my ship's core is still active. Its energy field interacts with Earth's natural systems, amplifying the effects. I thought it would stabilize over time, but..." She looked down at her hands, her glowing fingertips pulsing faintly. "It seems I underestimated the impact." Anger flared briefly in Ethan's chest, but it quickly gave way to concern. This wasn't Lyra's fault, not entirely. She hadn't asked to crash land here or disrupt the delicate balance of his world. Still, the consequences were real, and they couldn't be ignored. "What happens if someone finds out?" he asked quietly. "If they trace these changes back to us?" Lyra's expression darkened. "They will come looking for me. Not just your people, but others like me. Remnants of my kind who hunt those who flee. They will see my energy signature and know I am here." The weight of her words settled heavily between them. Ethan had suspected there might be risks involved in helping Lyra, but hearing it laid out so plainly made his stomach churn. Sheltering her wasn't just dangerous. It could put the entire town in jeopardy. "We need to do something," Ethan said firmly, rising to his feet. "We can't just sit here and wait for trouble to find us." Lyra stood as well, her gaze meeting his. "What do you propose? Destroy my ship? Cut off my energy source? That would leave me stranded, with no hope of returning home." Her tone carried an edge of desperation, and Ethan softened. He hadn't considered what such actions might mean for her. Stripping her of her connection to her ship would essentially render her powerless, cutting her off from any chance of escape should danger arise. And yet, doing nothing felt equally reckless. "There has to be another way," Ethan muttered, pacing the length of the workshop. "Maybe we can shield your energy somehow, or find a way to neutralize the interference without destroying your ship." Lyra tilted her head thoughtfully, considering his suggestion. "It is possible," she said slowly. "My people once developed cloaking technology designed to mask energy signatures. With enough resources, we could attempt to replicate it here." "Enough resources?" Ethan echoed skeptically. "You mean junkyard scraps and duct tape? Because that's about all I've got." A faint smile tugged at the corners of Lyra's lips. "Your ingenuity surprises me, Ethan. Perhaps together, we can make it work." Over the next several days, Ethan and Lyra threw themselves into the task of building a makeshift cloaking device. They scavenged parts from abandoned machinery, repurposed old circuit boards, and even dismantled pieces of Lyra's ship to salvage usable components. The process was painstaking, requiring countless hours of trial and error, but their determination never wavered. During these long nights, Ethan learned more about Lyra, not just her technical expertise, but the person behind the glowing facade. She spoke of her childhood on her homeworld, painting vivid pictures of floating cities bathed in perpetual twilight and forests that hummed with bioluminescent life. She described festivals where music and light intertwined, creating symphonies that resonated through the air itself. Her stories were beautiful, filled with wonder and nostalgia, but they also carried a bittersweet undertone, a longing for a place she could never return to. In turn, Ethan shared bits of his own life. Growing up in Meadowbrook, losing his parents at a young age, and finding solace in fixing broken things. He told her how repairing machines had taught him patience and perseverance, qualities that now guided him through every challenge. Lyra listened intently, her eyes softening with understanding. "You remind me of my brother," she said one night, as they worked late into the early hours. "He was always tinkering with gadgets, determined to make them better. You two would have gotten along." Ethan smiled faintly, though her words brought a pang of sadness. "Sounds like he was a good guy." "He was," Lyra replied, her voice barely above a whisper, "until the war took him." The silence that followed was heavy, punctuated only by the rhythmic clinking of tools against metal. Ethan didn't press her for details. Some wounds didn't need words to heal. By the end of the week, their efforts bore fruit. The cloaking device, a crude but functional contraption, was finally complete. When activated, it emitted a low-frequency pulse that dampened Lyra's energy emissions, effectively masking her presence from prying eyes. Testing it required venturing outside the workshop, something Lyra had avoided since her arrival. On a cloudy afternoon, they stepped cautiously into the forest, the device strapped securely to Lyra's wrist. Ethan held his breath as they moved deeper into the trees, half expecting the ground to crackle with electricity or the sky to split open with unnatural storms. But nothing happened. The air remained calm, the forest silent save for the rustling of leaves. "It works," Lyra breathed, her relief palpable. "We did it." Ethan grinned, feeling the surge of pride. "Guess we make a pretty good team." But their victory was short-lived. As they prepared to head back to the workshop, a distant rumble echoed through the woods, a sound neither of them recognized. It was low and mechanical, unlike anything native to Earth. Lyra stiffened, her glowing eyes darting toward the horizon. "They're here," she whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan's heart sank. "Who's here?" "The hunters," Lyra replied grimly. "They found me." For a moment, fear paralyzed them both. Then, with a steely resolve, Ethan grabbed Lyra's hand. "We'll deal with them together, whatever it takes." As they hurried back to the safety of the workshop, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that their fragile peace had been shattered, for good. The hunters were coming, and with them, a battle that would test everything they'd built. The distant rumble grew louder as Ethan and Lyra rushed back to the workshop, their footsteps crunching against the forest floor. The once familiar woods now felt ominous, every shadow stretching unnaturally long in the fading light of dusk. Lyra's glowing skin dimmed slightly, her energy suppressed by the cloaking device, but she still carried an aura of tension that was almost palpable. Her eyes darted nervously toward the sky, searching for signs of the ships she feared would descend at any moment. "They're scanning," Lyra whispered urgently, gripping Ethan's arm. "Their sensors are sweeping the area. It won't take them long to locate my ship." Ethan swallowed hard, his mind racing. He had always been good at solving problems, fixing broken engines, patching up old appliances. But this was something else entirely. This wasn't just about repairing something, it was about survival. "What do they want with you?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. Lyra hesitated, her expression darkening. "They hunt survivors like me, those who escaped enslavement. To them, we are resources to be reclaimed or eliminated. If they find me, they will not hesitate to destroy everything in their path." Her words sent a chill down Ethan's spine. These weren't ordinary hunters. They were ruthless, relentless, and armed with technology far beyond anything Earth could muster. Protecting Lyra meant putting himself, his town, and everyone he cared about in grave danger. Yet abandoning her wasn't an option either. Not after everything they'd built together. "We need a plan," Ethan said firmly, forcing himself to focus. "We can't just sit here and wait for them to come knocking." Lyra nodded, her resolve strengthening. "My ship's core is still intact. With your tools and my knowledge, we can modify it into a weapon. It won't match their firepower, but it might buy us time." Ethan clenched his jaw. Turning Lyra's ship, a symbol of hope and refuge, into a weapon felt wrong, but he knew they had no choice. Survival came first. "All right," he agreed. "Let's get to work." Back at the workshop, Ethan and Lyra worked feverishly through the night, transforming the space into a makeshift command center. Tools clattered, sparks flew, and the air buzzed with urgency as they dismantled parts of the alien pod and reassembled them into defensive systems. Lyra guided Ethan step by step, explaining how to channel the ship's residual energy into electromagnetic pulses capable of disabling enemy technology. "You're amazing at this," Ethan remarked as he soldered wires together under her instruction. "If only I'd met someone like you years ago. I'd have the coolest garage in the galaxy." Despite the grim circumstances, Lyra managed a faint smile. "Your skills are impressive too, Ethan. Few humans possess such adaptability. My people underestimated Earth because of its simplicity, but perhaps that is its greatest strength." Her compliment warmed him, even as the reality of their situation loomed over them. By morning, they had constructed several crude devices, portable EMP emitters, signal jammers, and reinforced shields designed to protect against laser fire. It wasn't much compared to what the hunters likely wielded, but it gave them a fighting chance. As dawn broke, the rumbling returned, closer this time. Ethan peered out the window of the workshop, his stomach sinking as he spotted 3 sleek, angular ships descending from the clouds. Their surfaces shimmered like liquid metal, reflecting the sunlight in eerie patterns. They hovered silently above Meadowbrook, scanning the ground below with beams of light that made the hairs on Ethan's arms stand on end. "They're here," Ethan murmured, his voice barely audible. Lyra joined him at the window, her expression grim. "They've already detected my energy signature. Hiding is no longer an option." Ethan turned to face her, determination hardening his features. "Then we fight, together." The townsfolk of Meadowbrook woke to chaos. Strange lights streaked across the sky, and the hum of alien engines filled the air. Panic spread quickly as people scrambled to understand what was happening. Some fled to their homes, locking doors and drawing curtains, while others gathered in the streets, staring upward in awe and fear. Ethan and Lyra emerged from the workshop, armed with their improvised arsenal. Lyra wore a backpack containing the modified ship core, its faint glow pulsing rhythmically beneath the fabric. Ethan carried one of the EMP emitters slung over his shoulder, feeling both terrified and strangely exhilarated. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just fixing things, he was protecting something worth saving. "Stay close," Lyra instructed as they moved toward the center of town. "And trust me when I say, do not underestimate them." The hunters wasted no time. One of the ships descended low enough to touch down near the edge of the forest, its landing struts extending with a metallic whine. A hatch opened, and figures clad in sleek, black armor stepped out. Their helmets obscured their faces, but their movements were fluid and precise, exuding an air of cold efficiency. Each carried weapons that glowed ominously, emitting soft hums that resonated with menace. "This is our home," shouted Mayor Thompson, stepping forward bravely despite the obvious danger. "Who are you, and what do you want?" One of the figures raised a hand, silencing him with a gesture. Then, in a voice distorted by some kind of translator device, it spoke. "We seek the fugitive known as Lyra 7. Surrender her, and we will leave your primitive settlement unharmed." Ethan exchanged a glance with Lyra, who stood frozen beside him. Her glowing eyes flickered with a mix of fear and defiance. She started to step forward, but Ethan grabbed her wrist, holding her back. "No," he said firmly. "You're not going anywhere." The lead hunter tilted its head, as if amused by Ethan's audacity. "Your interference is irrelevant, human. Step aside, or perish." Before Ethan could respond, Lyra stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I am Lyra 7. Leave these people alone. Your quarrel is with me." The hunter raised its weapon, aiming directly at her. "Surrender now, or we will eliminate all witnesses." Tension crackled in the air as the townsfolk watched, paralyzed with fear. But then, unexpectedly, Jake Miller, the same farmer whose tractor Ethan had repaired, stepped forward, brandishing a pitchfork. "You ain't taking nobody," he declared, his voice shaking but resolute. Others followed suit, grabbing whatever makeshift weapons they could find. Shovels, hammers, even frying pans. Ethan felt a surge of pride and dread as he realized the entire town was rallying behind them. These were simple people, unprepared for interstellar conflict, but their courage was undeniable. "Lyra," Ethan whispered urgently, "we need to act fast." She nodded, reaching into her backpack and activating the modified ship core. A pulse of energy radiated outward, disrupting the hunters' weapons and causing their armor to spark violently. The hunters staggered, momentarily disoriented, giving Ethan and the townsfolk a brief window of opportunity. "Now!" Ethan shouted, raising the EMP emitter and firing it at the nearest ship. The device emitted a high-pitched whine before releasing a burst of energy that engulfed the vessel, sending it crashing to the ground in a shower of sparks. Chaos erupted as the remaining hunters regrouped, retaliating with blasts of searing light. Ethan ducked behind a parked car, heart pounding as he watched Lyra dart between cover points, using her knowledge of their technology to disable more of their weapons. The townsfolk fought valiantly, pelting the invaders with rocks and debris, buying precious seconds for Ethan and Lyra to counterattack. But the hunters were relentless. Reinforcements arrived in the form of 2 additional ships, raining destruction upon the town. Buildings crumbled, fires erupted, and screams filled the air. Despite their best efforts, Ethan and Lyra were outnumbered and outgunned. "We can't hold them off forever," Ethan panted, wiping sweat from his brow. "There has to be another way." Lyra's eyes widened suddenly, an idea dawning on her. "The core," she said urgently. "If I overload it, I can create a massive EMP wave. It will disable all their ships. But it will also render mine useless. I'll never be able to leave." Ethan stared at her, torn between gratitude and despair. "Are you sure?" She nodded, her expression resolute. "It's the only way." With a heavy heart, Ethan helped Lyra position the core in the center of town. As she activated it, the device began to hum louder and brighter, its energy building to critical levels. The hunters realized what was happening and converged on their location, desperate to stop her. "Go," Lyra shouted, pushing Ethan away. "Get everyone to safety." Reluctantly, Ethan obeyed, ushering the townsfolk back as the core reached its peak. In a blinding flash of light, the EMP wave surged outward, engulfing the alien ships and rendering them inert. When the light faded, silence fell over Meadowbrook, broken only by the crackling of flames and the distant wail of sirens. Ethan turned back to find Lyra collapsed on the ground, her glow dimmer than ever. Kneeling beside her, he took her hand in his. "You did it," he said softly. "You saved us." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "Not just me," she replied weakly. "All of us." As the sun rose over the battered town, Ethan knew their battle was far from over. But for now, they had won. Together. The aftermath of the EMP blast left Meadowbrook in ruins. Buildings were scorched, streets littered with debris, and the air thick with smoke. Yet amidst the destruction, a fragile sense of victory lingered. The alien ships lay grounded, their sleek surfaces now dark and lifeless. The hunters who had terrorized the town were either incapacitated or retreating into the shadows, unwilling or unable to continue their assault. For the first time since their arrival, the townsfolk dared to breathe easier. Ethan knelt beside Lyra, his heart heavy as he watched her struggle to sit up. Her once vibrant glow had dimmed significantly, her energy sapped by the immense power she had unleashed. Despite her weakened state, there was no trace of regret in her luminous eyes, only quiet resolve. "You shouldn't have done that," Ethan murmured, his voice tinged with guilt. "You sacrificed your chance to leave. For us." Lyra managed a faint smile, though it was clear she was fighting exhaustion. "It was never about leaving," she replied softly. "It was about protecting those who showed me kindness when I had none. You gave me shelter, trust, and purpose. This was my way of repaying that debt." Her words struck a chord deep within Ethan. He had always been someone who fixed things. Machines, appliances, problems. But this was different. Lyra wasn't just another broken object to repair. She was a living being who had chosen to stand alongside him, even at great personal cost. Her sacrifice made him realize something profound. Their bond transcended worlds. It wasn't just about gratitude or obligation. It was about connection. As the townsfolk began to regroup, they gathered around Ethan and Lyra, their faces etched with both relief and awe. Mayor Thompson approached cautiously, his usual stern demeanor softened by the events of the night. "We owe you both our lives," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "What can we do to help?" Ethan looked at Lyra, silently asking if she wanted to speak. She shook her head gently, still too drained to address the crowd. Taking the lead, Ethan stood and addressed the townspeople. "Right now, we need to focus on rebuilding. Check on your neighbors, put out any remaining fires, and make sure everyone is safe. As for Lyra," he paused, glancing down at her, "she'll stay with me until she recovers. After that, we'll figure out what comes next." The townsfolk nodded in agreement, some murmuring words of thanks before chin that still mirrored the landscape. "They remind me of home," she said wistfully, "before everything fell apart." Ethan followed her gaze, observing the carefree way the children chased each other through the fields. "Do you miss it?" he asked gently. "Yes," she admitted, "but not the way it was at the end. I missed the simplicity, the beauty of a world untouched by greed. Sometimes I dream of showing them what my planet used to be like, teaching them about the stars." Her longing tugged at Ethan's heart. "Maybe one day you will," he said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Until then, you've got us. And we'll keep fighting. For Meadowbrook, for Earth, and for whatever future we can build together." Lyra turned to him, her glowing eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Ethan, for believing in me, for giving me a second chance." He grinned, his usual lightheartedness returning. "Hey, somebody's got to keep an eye on you, right? Can't have you blowing up any more spaceships." She laughed softly, the sound musical and soothing. For the first time in what felt like forever, the weight of their situation lifted, if only briefly. They had faced unimaginable odds and emerged stronger, not just as individuals, but as a team. Yet as the sun set over Meadowbrook, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Ethan couldn't ignore the lingering question: how long could they hold off the hunters? The battle might have been won, but the war was far from over. The uneasy calm that settled over Meadowbrook after the EMP blast lasted only a few days. Ethan and Lyra had hoped the hunters would retreat entirely, discouraged by their failed assault. But they underestimated the determination and ruthlessness of those who pursued Lyra. Late one night, as Ethan worked tirelessly in the workshop to reinforce the town's defenses, a faint hum echoed through the air, a sound both familiar and ominous. Lyra froze instantly, her glowing eyes widening with alarm. "They're back," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Their ships are reactivating." Ethan dropped his tools and rushed to the window, peering out into the darkness. Sure enough, the alien vessels that had been grounded near the forest were stirring once again, their surfaces shimmering faintly as power surged through them. Red lights blinked along their hulls, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. It was clear the hunters weren't going to give up, not without a fight. "We need to warn the town," Ethan said urgently, grabbing a flashlight and heading for the door. "Wake everyone up. Get them to safety." Lyra hesitated, guilt flashing across her face. "This is my fault," she murmured. "I should have left when I had the chance." "No," Ethan interrupted sharply, turning to face her. "You're not running anymore. We knew this might happen, and we've prepared for it. Now it's time to finish what we started." Her expression hardened, resolve replacing self-doubt. "Then let's do this together." Within minutes, the townsfolk were roused from their beds, alerted by the blaring alarms Ethan and Lyra had installed around Meadowbrook. Mayor Thompson took charge of organizing the evacuation, directing people toward the underground storm shelter on the outskirts of town. Meanwhile, Ethan and a small group of volunteers, armed with scavenged weapons and makeshift gadgets, prepared to hold the line against the invaders. "You don't have to do this," Ethan told Jake Miller and a few others who insisted on staying behind. "These things aren't human. They'll tear through us if we're not careful." Jake grinned, gripping a pitchfork like a spear. "We didn't sign up for space battles, but we sure ain't backing down now. You saved our town once already. Let us help you save it again." Ethan wanted to argue, but he knew better. These people weren't soldiers. They were farmers, shopkeepers, and mechanics, but they were determined to protect their home. Together, they formed a ragtag resistance, standing shoulder to shoulder as the first wave of hunters descended upon Meadowbrook. The aliens emerged from their ships in greater numbers than before, their sleek armor gleaming under the moonlight. Their weapons crackled with energy, and their movements were eerily synchronized, as though guided by a single mind. At their center stood a towering figure clad in gold-plated armor, a leader, judging by the intricate markings etched into its helmet. Its voice boomed through a translator device, echoing across the battlefield. "Surrender the fugitive, or your primitive settlement will burn." Ethan stepped forward, clutching the EMP emitter he had modified further since the last battle. "Go ahead and try," he shouted back, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. "We're not afraid of you." The leader tilted its head, seemingly amused by Ethan's defiance. Then, with a dismissive wave, it signaled its troops to advance. Chaos erupted as beams of searing light cut through the air, forcing Ethan and his companions to dive for cover. The hunters moved swiftly, their attacks precise and devastating. Buildings crumbled, trees ignited, and the ground shook beneath the force of their assault. But Ethan and his team weren't defenseless. Using the knowledge Lyra had imparted, they deployed traps and countermeasures designed to exploit the hunters' reliance on technology. Hidden tripwires triggered bursts of electromagnetic pulses, temporarily disabling several enemies. Repurposed drones buzzed overhead, distracting the invaders while Ethan and his allies regrouped. Amidst the chaos, Lyra played a crucial role. From a hidden vantage point near the workshop, she used her intimate understanding of the hunters' tech to sabotage their systems remotely. She hacked into their communication channels, broadcasting distorted signals that caused confusion among their ranks. Her actions bought precious seconds for Ethan and the others to mount a counterattack. Focus on the leader. Lyra called out over a makeshift radio link. If we take it down, the rest may falter. Ethan nodded grimly, rallying his team. You heard her. Stick together and aim for the big guy. As they pushed forward, dodging blasts and returning fire with crude weapons, Ethan couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come. Just weeks ago, he had been a simple mechanic fixing broken tractors. Now he was leading a desperate charge against interstellar invaders, all because of the woman who had crash-landed in his life. The final confrontation took place in the heart of town, where the golden armored leader stood surrounded by a protective circle of hunters. Ethan and his team fought valiantly to break through, but the enemy's firepower was overwhelming. One by one, the defenders fell back, injured or exhausted, until only Ethan remained standing. You cannot win, the leader declared, raising its weapon. Your resistance is futile. Ethan clenched his jaw, refusing to yield. He glanced toward the workshop, where Lyra continued to work furiously, her hands flying over a control panel rigged to the remnants of her ship's core. Not yet, he muttered under his breath. Just as the leader prepared to strike, a deafening pulse of energy surged outward, engulfing the entire battlefield. The hunters staggered, their weapons sputtering and failing as the EMP wave disrupted their systems. The leader collapsed to its knees, its golden armor sparking violently. Now, Lyra's voice rang out over the radio. Summoning every ounce of courage, Ethan charged forward, aiming the EMP emitter directly at the leader. With a final burst of energy, he fired, sending the towering figure crashing to the ground. Its helmet shattered, revealing a face eerily similar to Lyra's, but colder, devoid of emotion. For a moment, silence fell over Meadowbrook. The remaining hunters retreated, dragging their disabled comrades aboard their ships. As the vessels ascended into the sky, Ethan sank to his knees, breathing heavily. His body ached, his clothes were singed, and his hands trembled with exhaustion. But they had done it. Together, they had driven the invaders away. When Ethan returned to the workshop, Lyra was waiting for him, her glow dimmer than ever but her expression triumphant. It's over, she said softly. For now. He nodded, collapsing onto a stool beside her. Yeah, for now. Despite the victory, neither of them felt truly at ease. The hunters might return, stronger and more determined than before. And even if they didn't, the cost of the battle weighed heavily on both of them. Homes had been destroyed, lives disrupted, and scars, both visible and invisible, would linger long after the fires burned out. But amidst the devastation, something remarkable had emerged: unity. The people of Meadowbrook had banded together, proving that strength wasn't measured by advanced technology or superior firepower. It came from standing side by side, protecting what mattered most. As dawn broke over the battered town, Ethan looked at Lyra, gratitude swelling in his chest. Thank you, he said simply, for everything. She smiled faintly, her luminous eyes meeting his. No, Ethan. Thank you. Without you, I would still be lost. In that moment, surrounded by ruins but filled with hope, they realized something profound. Their bond had transcended worlds, forged in the crucible of adversity. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as equals, as partners, and as friends. The days following the battle were a blur of rebuilding and reflection for Meadowbrook. The scars left by the hunters' attack were evident everywhere: charred buildings, cracked roads, and fields scorched beyond recognition. Yet, amidst the wreckage, there was an undeniable sense of resilience. The townsfolk worked tirelessly to restore their community, driven not just by necessity but by a newfound unity forged in the face of unimaginable danger. Ethan played a central role in the recovery efforts, his skills as a mechanic proving invaluable. With Lyra's guidance, he modified salvaged alien technology to create tools that made the rebuilding process faster and more efficient. Tractors hummed with enhanced engines, water pumps operated flawlessly despite damaged infrastructure, and even the bakery's oven was upgraded to bake twice as many loaves at once. The people of Meadowbrook marveled at these innovations, though they never questioned where they came from. To them, Ethan had always been a miracle worker. It was simply who he was. But it wasn't just Ethan's ingenuity that inspired the town. It was Lyra's quiet determination. Though her energy had diminished significantly after overloading her ship's core, she refused to let exhaustion slow her down. She moved among the townsfolk, offering assistance wherever she could. Whether it was helping Mrs. Henderson knead dough or teaching Jake Miller how to repair a broken fence using advanced techniques, Lyra immersed herself in the daily rhythm of life in Meadowbrook. Her presence, once shrouded in secrecy, became a symbol of hope and perseverance. For Ethan, watching Lyra interact so openly with the townsfolk filled him with pride and a tinge of sadness. He knew she couldn't stay hidden forever, but he also understood the risks involved in revealing her true nature. Still, the people accepted her without hesitation, drawn to her kindness and humility. It was as if they instinctively recognized that she was one of them now, not just an outsider seeking refuge, but a member of their community. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light over the newly repaired town square, Ethan found Lyra sitting on a bench near the fountain. She gazed at the water cascading into the basin, her glowing skin reflecting softly off its surface. Despite everything they'd been through, there was a peace about her that hadn't been there before. "You've done so much for this place," Ethan said, sitting beside her. "They wouldn't have made it this far without you." Lyra smiled faintly, turning to look at him. "And you've done so much for me. You gave me a home when I had none, a purpose when I thought I had lost mine." Her words stirred something deep within Ethan. Since the day she had crash-landed in his workshop, their lives had become intertwined in ways neither could have predicted. What began as an act of compassion had blossomed into something greater, a partnership built on trust, respect, and shared sacrifice. He realized now that Lyra wasn't just someone he had helped. She had changed him too. She had taught him to see beyond his own limitations, to embrace challenges rather than shy away from them, and to believe in the power of connection, even across worlds. "I don't know what we would have done without you," Ethan admitted, his voice tinged with emotion. "You saved us, all of us, not just from the hunters, but from ourselves. Before you came along, we were content to live quietly, ignoring anything outside our little bubble. But now," he gestured toward the bustling square, where families laughed and children played. "Now we're stronger, smarter, better prepared for whatever comes next." Lyra nodded thoughtfully, her eyes softening. "That is the beauty of humanity. You adapt, you grow, even when faced with forces beyond your understanding, you find a way to endure." "But what about you?" Ethan asked, his tone growing serious. "What happens now? Your ship's core is gone. You can't leave anymore, even if you wanted to." A shadow passed over Lyra's face, but it quickly dissolved into resolve. "I don't want to leave," she said firmly. "This is my home now. And while I may never return to the stars, I still have a role to play here, to teach, to share knowledge, to help humanity avoid the mistakes my people made." Her conviction surprised Ethan, though it shouldn't have. Lyra had always been selfless, putting others before herself even when it cost her dearly. But hearing her declare her commitment to Earth, to Meadowbrook, felt like a turning point. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about building something lasting. Inspired by her words, Ethan decided to take action. Over the next few weeks, he dedicated himself to advancing sustainable technologies, drawing on Lyra's expertise to develop systems that could benefit not just Meadowbrook, but the wider world. Solar panels powered by residual alien energy lined rooftops, wind turbines hummed steadily in the fields, and waste management systems converted garbage into usable resources. Slowly but surely, the town transformed into a model of eco-friendly innovation, a testament to what could be achieved when different minds came together. Word of Meadowbrook's transformation spread beyond its borders, attracting attention from scientists, engineers, and curious visitors eager to learn about the town's remarkable advancements. At first, Ethan and Lyra worried that outsiders might uncover her secret, but the townsfolk guarded her fiercely, deflecting questions with vague explanations about cutting-edge research and experimental prototypes. To everyone else, Lyra was simply a brilliant inventor whose contributions had changed their lives for the better. As the seasons shifted and the town flourished, Ethan and Lyra's bond deepened further. Their partnership evolved into something more profound, a friendship rooted in mutual admiration and shared experiences. Late-night conversations turned into stargazing sessions where they pondered the mysteries of the universe and dreamed of the future. For Lyra, who had once believed herself alone, these moments were precious reminders that she belonged somewhere, that she mattered. One crisp autumn morning, as Ethan stood beside Lyra overlooking the town from a hilltop, he felt a surge of gratitude. Despite everything they had endured, the battles, the sacrifices, the uncertainty, they had emerged stronger. Together, they had proven that even in the darkest times, hope could shine brightest. "What are you thinking about?" Lyra asked, noticing the thoughtful expression on his face. Ethan grinned, shaking his head slightly. "Just how lucky I am. How lucky we all are. Things could have gone so differently, but instead, we've built something incredible. Something worth protecting." Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch warm despite her cool skin. "We did this together, Ethan. And we'll keep doing it. As long as it takes." As the sun rose higher, bathing the landscape in golden light, Ethan and Lyra stood side by side, gazing at the horizon. Behind them lay a town reborn, its people united by courage and determination. Ahead stretched an uncertain future, full of possibilities and challenges yet unknown. But one thing was certain: no matter what came next, they would face it together. In the end, their story wasn't just about survival, it was about connection, about finding strength in vulnerability, beauty in diversity, and hope in the unlikeliest of places. For Ethan and Lyra, the journey was far from over. But as they walked back toward Meadowbrook, hand in hand, they knew they were ready for whatever lay ahead.